Hello everybody and welcome in this new video from AB Travel Joy. In this video we're gonna discuss about a multimeter. With a multimeter you can find small or sometimes bigger electronical problems in your car, in your van, in your camper, in your caravan, motorcycle or whatever. I think it can be very useful to have this with you while traveling because it can help you finding these small problems. In this video we're going to discuss about using a multimeter. We're going to talk about battery voltage and two different systems. We're going to talk about finding an electrical problem in your system by a method we call the V4 measuring. Talk about that later. And we're going to talk about finding a broken fuse with a multimeter. This is called a multimeter because you can measure more than only voltage. Voltage is the only thing we're going to discuss about in this video, but you can also measure temperature, amps, resistance, a diode or whatever. So that's the reason why they call it a multimeter, but in this video we're going to stick to measuring a voltage. So let's get started. Okay, first of all we're going to talk about battery voltage. And it's not too difficult, but it's good to focus on two different systems. I still think that the battery you see the most at this time is still a AGM battery. This is a lead acid battery, and the only thing is what you have to know is like the voltage of the battery. Is the voltage below 12.0 volts, then it's empty. There are like these deep cycle batteries. Some people say that you can discharge it like 11.7 volts, but that's always the type of battery. But in common, you can say if a AGM battery is lower than 12.0 volts, it's empty. You charge it with a maximum of 14.7 volts. So in this AGM system, it's very important that you measure or check the battery voltage. Talking about lithium or LiFePO4 or whatever, there is a BMS. A BMS is a battery management system. And you can check this normally with an app on your phone or whatever, and you can see a lot of more stuff than only a voltage on the AGM battery. You can see how it's getting discharged. You can see how it is charged. You can see what the energy was from the sun panels or whatever. You can find everything in this BMS. This is actually not too difficult. Just follow the BMS and you know how it's going on with your battery. In the AGM system, you have to check the voltage. Now I'm going to tell you how to connect the wiring on your multimeter. Okay, here is the multimeter. I switched it on to DC voltage on a maximum of 20 volts because a battery is always a maximum of 14 or 15 volts. So here you're safe. You need to use this connection and this connection. And now I'm going to put in the cables. The black one in COM and the red one, here you can see voltage. So put it here in voltage. Take care or watch out that you don't use this one, because in this one you can measure amps, but there is a possibility for a shortcut and a broken fuse because of the multimeter. So we're not going to discuss this about in this video because that's really something else. So we stick to voltage on DC, a maximum of 20, and this is the way how you connect your wiring. And to be sure, this is the symbol for DC. This is the symbol for AC. This is what you have in your house, like 220 volts or 110 volts. So in the car, or in the camper or whatever, we use DC, this symbol. Okay, just one moment, going back to the AGM battery. I'm not going to discuss anymore about the lithium because the BMS is telling you what to do or what not to do. this is all in the BMS system. Check it on your app, on your phone or whatever. But with the BMS system, you know what you have to do. And with a old-fashioned AGM battery, this voltage is very important. First of all, check the factory details. So what's the factory of this battery telling you about the voltage of the battery? But like in common, you can say when it's 12.7 volts or more, then it's fully charged. And when it's 12.0 or less, the battery is empty. And I really think this is good to know. What also is good to know is that a AGM battery can recover a little bit after getting discharged. Like if you use a lot of power, you can see the voltage is getting lower and lower and lower, like 11.9 volts. But when you stop taking all this power out of the battery, you can see that the battery will recover a little bit. Like it's turning up from 11.9 to 12.0 to 12.1 to 12.2. So to read the really voltage of the battery, I think it's good to discharge it a little bit. Then you know what's going on. Okay, now let's check this battery, just to be sure. The red is of course plus, the black one is of course minus, and my multimeter's telling me that this battery has 12.7 volts. That means that this battery is fully charged. And with a multimeter, it is also possible to find a positive or a negative wiring. Like in this connector, I don't know which one is positive or negative. So if I use my multimeter on DC and switched on 20 volts, and I put in my measuring pins like this, I see 12.9 volts. When I switch my measuring pins, so I put now on the black on the left and the red on the right, I see this minus symbol. This minus means that the measuring pins are connected on the wrong way. So now you have to switch again. Red on left, black on right, and this minus symbol is gone now. That means that it's connected on the right way. So now I know red is on the left, this is positive, black is on the right, this is negative. On this way, you can find positive and negative in your circuit with a multimeter. Okie dokie. As promised, first this method. We call it the V4 method. And with these 4 measurements, you can find where in the system the problem is. So, first of all, you always start to measure battery voltage. That's the most important. If you have a problem, but you forget to measure the battery voltage, then an empty battery, you cannot find it. So you have always to start the battery voltage. You're not going to measure it in a socket or on a spot you think there is 12 volt or whatever. Measure it on the battery. That's really, really important. Then, the second measurement you're going to do is the measurement on the component, which one it's not working or it's not doing what you want it to do, and there you can measure it. Let this be clear, you have to put it on. Even when it's not working, you have to put the switch on or whatever, even when it's not working. And then you're going to measure the voltage over the component. I draw this really, really simple picture, but this is going to tell us where you have to measure. So the battery is here. The first measurement is this V1 measurement on the battery. Then you have the second measurement on the component. You can measure it on the back side, on a connector, inside the connector or whatever. Don't take the connector off the component and measure inside, because then it's still not switched on because the connector is taken off. So that's very important. Leave the connector on the component, yeah? Then the third measurement, what you're gonna do is measure from the plus side of the battery to the plus side of the component. This is the third measurement you're gonna do. The last one, the fourth, you're gonna measure from the minus side from the component to the minus side of the battery. Write down what the voltage is you measure on these 4 spots. So, to be clear, the first measurement is on the battery, the second measurement is on the component, leave it switched on and leave the connectors on. The third measurement is from the positive side of the battery to the positive side on the component. And the last and fourth measurement is from the minus side of the component to the minus side of the battery. Write it down. Okie dokie. It is very important then when you start a measurement that you know what you can expect. What I always say is, when you go to a doctor and the doctor is gonna measure your blood pressure, but he don't know what is normal for your age, then why do you have to measure blood pressure if you don't know what it had to be or has to be? So it is very important that when you use a multimeter, that you know what you expect to measure. That's very important, because you can measure all around, but if you don't know what it has to be, then leave it. Then it's completely useless to use a multimeter if you don't know what you're gonna measure. So here are 4 measurements on a normal system, a normal, good working system. The battery is like more or less 12 volts. When it's charged, it's maximum or 14.7 volts or something, but in common 12 volts. The voltage on the component is also 12 volts. When it's like a light bulb, and the light bulb, it says it's like a 5 watt and 12 volts, then it needs 12 volts to use the power of 5 watt. So on the component you need the battery voltage. Then on a normal good working system, from the positive side of the battery to the positive side of the component, you have to measure 0 voltage. And also on the minus side, from the minus of the component to the minus of the battery, you also have to measure 0 voltage. When you measure this, the component works. When you measure this and the component doesn't work, then the component is broken. Yeah, don't measure anymore. There is one completely clear diagnosis. If you measure this and the component, your water pump, a light bulb or a heating system or whatever, if you measure this and it's not working, the component is broken. That's it. Okay, now we all know what to measure on a good working system. That's really important to know. Then 2 situations, a problem in the positive side, in the plus side of the system. There are 2 possibilities. The component isn't working at all, like your water pump, there's no water at all, or it is bad working. It's like the speed is not enough, there is no pressure, or a light bulb isn't bright enough and it's burning really weak. For these 2 problems, I wrote down some possible measurements. First, a not working water pump. On the battery, you measure, of course, 12 volts. 0 volts on the component, it isn't working, so 0 volts. Because the problem is on the positive side, you will lose 12 volts on the positive side, and on the negative side 0 volt. So the problem, now you know, the problem is in the positive side. There is probably a disconnection or something, a broken fuse, but you lose 12 volts on the positive side, so you miss 12 volts on your component. Then this bad working situation, like there is no pressure or the speed is not enough or whatever, you measure 12 volts on the battery, like 6 volts is like an example. So if you measure 6 volts on the component, then you know you lose somewhere else 6 volts. Because we're talking about a problem on the positive side, you will find this lost 6 volts on the positive side, so in the third measurement, and then of course 0 voltage on the negative side. So now you know the problem is in the positive side. You lose 6 volt. It is not a disconnection, because if it was a disconnection, then you have this measurement, outcome of this measurement. But this is what we see, and normally this is like a corroded connection, bad wires, oxidation or whatever. So check your wiring if you measure this. Okay, next situation. Now we're going to talk about a problem on the negative side of the system. When the component, and it can be still your water pump or a light bulb or whatever, it's not working, then you measure 12 volts on the battery, you measure 0 volts on the component, so you know it's not a problem like a broken component because there are 0 volts. Then you know you have to lose 12 on the positive side or on the negative side. Because we're talking about the negative side, it will be 0 volts lost in the positive side and 12 volts lost on the negative side. So now you know the problem is on the negative side. Also a bad connection, normally a broken connection. It can be a fuse because there is never a fuse on the negative side. It is a connector, loosened connector, or a connection to the chassis, something like this. Then measurements about a bad working system, like a water pump, not pressure enough, a light bulb, no brightness enough, and 12 volts on the battery. For example, 4 volts on your water pump, 0 volts on the positive side. So now you know you lose 8 volts on your negative side, and that's what you find here. So now you know the problem is on the negative side of your circuit. And normally if you measure something like this, then check your connections to the body of the vehicle. So all the negative connections is normally bolted to the chassis. Check these connections of corrosion, or maybe the bolts are loosened or whatever, but check these points. Normally it's always something like a bad connection to the bodywork of the car. So this is a few possibilities to measure, and now you know how to act actually in a situation when there is a component not working properly. Okay, and not to forget about charging a battery. Is my battery charging or not? When we're talking about lithium or all the other newer systems, check your BMS. Your BMS can tell you yes or no. But if we use this normal or old school AGM lead acid battery, then there are some things you have to know. Is your car smart charged or not? With smart charged, these are cars that when you drive normally on a highway, your starter battery is not charged by your generator. It's only charging your battery when the battery is almost empty, or when you're braking on your engine, then it will charge your battery. So when you charge smart like this, it costs less energy from the engine, so it costs less fuel. But this is for a camper van not good, because we want to charge our living battery. So if you have a smart charge system, then you need a booster. A booster will charge up your living battery up to 14.7 volts, so it will be charged by your generator. So there is a booster in between. My car, if I drive with my Peugeot Boxer from 2021 on the highway, I can check my voltage on my starter battery and I see that it's 12.2 volts. So it's not charging a lot. But when I'm braking on my engine because of a red light or I go downhill, then I see my battery voltage from the starter battery going up until 14.6, 14.7 volt. Then it's charging. But I want to charge my living battery always, like I start the engine and it has to charge. So then we need a booster. Okay, for the AGM batteries, is your voltage on the battery lower than 12.7, then it's not charging. If it's higher than 12.7, yes, it is charging. And if it's higher than 14.7 volts, you have a problem. Disconnect your battery. Normally it's not a booster. Normally when you see this, it is the regulator of a sun panel has a problem, and then you can see 15, 16 or 17 volts. Disconnect your battery because it will overcook with all the problems. It can explode or whatever. It's not safe to keep it connected. So when you see voltages higher than 14.7, there is a problem, and then you have to disconnect the battery. If you're talking about a lithium or LiFePO, the BMS will cut off the battery. So there's no problem at all. The BMS is taking care of it. Also, when the battery is almost empty, it is not possible to completely discharge a lithium battery. It's not possible. The BMS will cut it off. There's still 10% inside. With a AGM battery, there is no BMS inside, and there it is possible to discharge it completely. And normally a AGM battery which is completely discharged, actually it is broken. You can throw it away. Sometimes it recovers a little bit, but there's a lot of damage inside of the battery. So you always have to take care that the voltage on the battery never getting lower than 12.0 volts. I'm going to talk about finding a broken fuse with your multimeter. This is way more easy than pulling out of these fuses to check them. Here you can see this fuse is completely okay. Because of this, you can see in the middle, it is it's not burned, it's not melted or whatever. So this is a good fuse. This is a broken fuse. You can see that the wiring here inside, it's melted. This is also you can see normally a letter S, but this one is melted. And now we're going to talk about finding a fuse, broken fuse with a multimeter without pulling all the fuses out of the fuse box. Okay. This is a fuse, or I tried to draw one like this, a fuse. Inside a fuse there's a thin wire, and when the current inside your electrical system is getting higher than the current it's what's set on the top of the fuse, like 10 amps, this wire will melt. This is a safety, so there will be not any fire in your camper, truck or van or whatever. The moment that this wire melts, there will be a disconnection in your circuit. There is no power anymore, no current anymore, so no fire. This is what a fuse is for. And now, finding a fuse broken in a fuse box. Sometimes you see people pull out all of these fuses, and in a simple van or camper it can be 5 fuses, so it's not too difficult, but sometimes it can be 30 fuses. And pulling out of every fuse, it means that the circuit behind the fuse is powerless. Sometimes this is a problem, like a heating system. When a heating system has a clock inside, then it's reset because there was no power anymore because you pulled out the fuse. On a motor management system, the engine of the car, it is really a problem. You can pull out a fuse and the transmission can lock because there is no power anymore. So don't pull all the fuses out. Use a multimeter to find. How can you find a broken fuse fast with a multimeter? That's what we're going to discuss about now. Okay, here is our multimeter, and with this multimeter we're going to measure the fuses. I'm doing it like this because now you can see it better, but in theory it's the same than when you practice it on your van. If the fuse like this is still intact, then there will be 12 volt on this side of the fuse, and of course also 12 volt on this side on the fuse. So if you use a multimeter and you measure on top of the fuse, like here, there will be a close-up after this video. When you measure like this, here and there, so here and here, this will be connected to this, then here is 12 volt and there is 12 volt. The difference between 12 and 12 is 0, so your multimeter is going to tell you that the voltage on your fuse is 0 volt. If you measure 0 volts, you know the fuse is still intact. But when there was a problem and the fuse is open like this, you measure again with your multimeter from here to here, then there will be 12 volt on this side, and unfortunately there will be 0 volt on this side because it's broken. 12 there, it's broken, 0 here. When you're going to measure with your multimeter, your multimeter sees 12 volts here, 0 volts there. The difference between 12 and 0 is 12. So your multimeter is going to tell you there's 12 volts missing on your fuse. That means your fuse is broken down. This is a fast method for finding a broken fuse. And you don't have to disconnect all the fuses in the fuse box. And that's much, much, much better and also faster. So this is a fast method by checking your fuses in your fuse box. Okie dokie. This is the end of the video about using a multimeter. I think it can be really useful while traveling. I hope you learned something in this video about using a multimeter. If there are any questions, please let me know. If you liked the video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for notifications about next movies. The next movie will be online in 2 or 3 weeks, and it's about how a diesel engine works. So that will be the next video on our channel, AB Travel Joy Technology. See you!